In the shadow of the Grand Serihim kingdom, where towering spires pierced the clouds and golden banners fluttered in the wind, lay the slums, a place forgotten by time and prosperity. The air here was thick with the scent of decay, and the streets were lined with crumbling shacks and weary faces. It was a world away from the wealthiest parts of the capital, a place where survival was the only currency that mattered. In this desolate corner of the kingdom lived a young boy named Reo Tomir, our protagonist. Despite the poverty that surrounded him, Reo was a beacon of joy, his laughter echoing through the narrow alleys as he played with his only friend, Zarin. Zarin was a scrawny boy with a mop of unruly hair and a smile that could light up even the darkest corners of the slums. Together, they found solace in their games, their imaginations transforming the bleak landscape into a world of adventure. Reo's parents, worn down by years of hardship, were distant figures in his life. His father, a gruff man with calloused hands, spent his days toiling in the fields, while his mother, a woman with hollow eyes, tended to their meager home. They loved Reo in their own way, but the weight of their struggles left little room for affection. Everything changed on the day Reo turned 8. It started as a faint warmth in his chest, a sensation that grew stronger with each passing day. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but soon, the warmth became impossible to ignore. It was as if a dormant flame had been ignited within him, its heat coursing through his veins. Confused and frightened, Reo turned to his parents for answers. "Mom, Dad, I feel something strange inside me," he said, his voice trembling. But his parents merely shrugged, their faces blank. "It's nothing," his father muttered, his tone dismissive. "Just your imagination." Reo then confided in Zarin, hoping his friend might understand. "I feel like there's something pulsing inside me," he said one evening as they sat beneath the gnarled branches of an old tree. Zarin tilted his head, his brow furrowed in thought. "Maybe it's magic," he suggested, his eyes wide with wonder. "Like the stories they tell about the heroes in the capital." But Reo shook his head. "No one in the slums has magic," he said, his voice tinged with doubt. Though doubtful, Reo thought about it some more before dismissing the thoughts again. One fateful afternoon, as Reo and Zarin played with a makeshift ragdoll ball, the warmth inside Reo surged uncontrollably. He tossed the ball to Zarin, but as it left his hands, it burst into flames, streaking through the air like a comet. The fiery projectile narrowly missed Zarin and struck a nearby tree, setting it ablaze. Reo stared in shock, his heart pounding in his chest. Zarin, however, was ecstatic. "That was amazing," he exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Do it again." But Reo couldn't. The warmth inside him had faded, leaving him drained and exhausted. Word of the incident spread quickly through the slums, and soon, curious onlookers began to gather. Among them were those with greed in their eyes, whispering about the riches a child with magic could bring. After hearing about this, Reo's parents, sensing an opportunity, confronted him that evening. "Show us what you can do," his father demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. But try as he might, Reo couldn't summon the flames again. His parents' disappointment quickly turned to anger, and for the first time, Reo felt the sting of their wrath. As the years passed, the abuse grew worse. Reo's parents, desperate to escape poverty, pushed him relentlessly, their frustration boiling over into violence. The once joyful boy became a shadow of his former self, his spirit crushed under the weight of their expectations. By the time Reo turned 12, he had all but given up on his powers. The warmth inside him had become a distant memory, buried beneath layers of fear and self-doubt. But one day, during a particularly brutal beating, something inside him snapped. The warmth surged to life once more, and a burst of fire erupted from his hands, sending his parents stumbling backward. Their eyes lit up with greed. "We're taking you to the capital," his father declared, his voice trembling with excitement. "You're going to make us rich." Making their way to the capital, Reo was awestruck by the world that unfolded before him. Towering buildings of marble and gold loomed overhead, their grandeur a stark contrast to the squalor of the slums. The streets were bustling with people, many using all sorts of magic and unique skills, their fine clothes and haughty expressions a reminder of the divide between the rich and the poor. At the gates, a guard stopped them, asking them to state their business. The guard's expression became skeptical shortly after hearing the explanation. "You say this boy can use magic?" he asked, his tone dripping with disbelief. "That's impossible. Children don't awaken until they're 13. Rio's father insisted, his voice rising with desperation. "He can do it. Show him, Rio." But Rio hesitated, his hands trembling. The guard's skepticism only deepened his fear, and for a moment, it seemed as though they would be turned away. Then, in a moment of desperation, Rio remembered a spell he had seen on the journey, a simple gust of wind. Summoning the last of his courage, he focused on the warmth inside him and unleashed the spell. The guard's eyes widened in surprise. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "All right, you're in. The selection event is tomorrow." Rio and his parents were given somewhere to stay for the night as they waited for the next day. This selection process is how the kingdom determined the next generation of heroes. The following day, the event was a spectacle unlike anything Rio had ever witnessed. Hundreds of children, each able to use magic or possessing their own unique abilities, gathered in the grand arena. The air was thick with tension as the selection process began. One by one, the heroes were chosen. First was Ragnas Bellenheim, a noble's son with unmatched sword skills. Next came Kara Ignis, a healer of extraordinary talent, followed by Leo Belham, a tank with impenetrable defense. Aaron Butler, a monster tamer, was the fourth to be selected. Finally, it was Rio's turn. Despite his humble origins, his ability to wield both fire and wind magic earned him a place among the heroes. But the joy of his selection was short-lived. The noble children, particularly Ragnas, made no effort to hide their disdain. "A slum rat among heroes," Ragnas sneered. "This is a joke." For 2 years, Rio endured the mockery and exclusion of his peers. His growth was stunted, his powers limited to basic spells. The trauma of his upbringing and the constant belittlement took their toll, leaving him a shell of his former self. Rio would go on missions with his party to defeat monsters as part of their training but was never treated as an equal. Tension continued to build due to how ineffective Rio's spells quickly became as they fought tougher and tougher monsters. When Ragnas finally kicked him out of the party, Rio's world crumbled. His parents, furious at the loss of their newfound wealth, turned on him with a vengeance. "You useless brat!" his father roared, his fists raining down on Rio. "You've ruined everything." Broken and defeated, Rio fled the capital, his heart heavy with despair. He returned to the slums, only to find them in worse condition than before. The people were starving, their hope extinguished. Among them was Zarin, frail and on the brink of death. "Rio," Zarin whispered, his voice barely audible. "I thought you'd escaped this place." Rio's heart ached at the sight of his friend. "I'm sorry," he murmured, tears streaming down his face. "I failed." But as he looked back at Zarin, seeing his friend in this condition, as down as Rio may have been, he knew he had to try and do something. A spark of determination ignited within him. "No," he said, his voice firm. "I won't let you die like this." After hearing about what had happened since he had been gone, Rio, using his magic, secured Zarin's entry into the next town, where some of his family still lived. As they parted ways, Zarin gave him a faint smile. "Take care of yourself, Rio." Alone once more, Rio stood at the edge of the wilderness, the rain soaking through his clothes. The years of abuse and betrayal had left him scarred, but they had also forged a resolve within him. He realized that in this cruel world, strength was the only thing that mattered. With a deep breath, Rio stepped into the unknown, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He would train, he would grow stronger, and he would never let anyone control his destiny again. The journey ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in years, Rayo felt a flicker of hope. The boy from the slums was gone. In his place stood a young man determined to carve his own path, no matter the cost.